Hello, and welcome back to Therapist Plays Disco Elysium. So, on today's episode, and probably for the next couple, we're going to be tying up some loose ends now that Kim has departed from the party for the time being. Today, we're going to check back in with Lena, the cryptozoologist, since we recently found her husband. And our discussion today is on how a person's memories can be strongly influenced by their emotional connection to those events. And sometimes that overrides our rationale for what is true in reality. We still don't really know if all of this cryptozoology stuff is real, but we're kind of asking the question of, does it matter? Because the emotional connection Lena has to this subject and her memories about it definitely matter to her. I think this is a discussion that's worth having about our own memories, but Lena kind of gives us the perfect opportunity to explore that subject. So I'm excited to dive in. Let's do it. Okay, we're back. And we actually have the opportunity right now to do some things without Kim present. There's a couple of things that I definitely don't want to do without Kim. Like exploring across the waterlock. I feel like there's still some characters to meet and things I want to do with Kim present, because at this point in the playthrough I actually really enjoy his his commentary and just how much we contrast each other. But since we have this opportunity, I think it'd be a good time to kind of revisit some characters and just do some solo detective work. So first things first, let's check out that window. I feel like now we're entering our real detective arc. And I think we have everything still on that we want. I kind of want to buff these intellect areas when I do stuff like investigate this window.
This window is pristine on the inside, unlike the one next to it. Light from the desk lamp reflects off the glass in an untarnished golden halo.
Let me quickly check. There's nothing else that gives me visual calculus. I should mention, especially after the last episode, I am not like a min-maxer in any game. I do not really engage in that that deep of game mechanics. I mean I will to a certain degree, right? When I played Destiny or Diablo or CRPGs, other CRPGs like Pillars of Eternity or something, I'll pay attention to the stats. I'll try to outfit my character, but I'm not a min-maxer. I'm not gonna squeeze every possible point out, but this game makes me want to do that. This game of all games makes me be like, fuck man, I need every single possible point I can get in the thing I'm trying to get to, which I think is just fascinating. When there is a narrative purpose to it, then I'll be compelled to interact with the game design at that level. But when the only incentive is just, do I want to min-max something that I probably don't need to? When I play a Souls game, I don't really pay that much attention to the stats. They're important, sure, but I'll try to just muscle my way through it. Anyways, yeah, I just find it fascinating.
Is pristine on the inside, unlike the one next to it. Light from the desk lamp reflects off the glass in an untarnished golden halo.
72% her. Let's roll the dice.
Golden light melts away into the blue, glassy darkness of your mind. In it are two neon-lit shapes, a man and a woman on the single bed.
Okay, this is interesting. The way visual calculus lets you interpret things. It's pretty cool. So this looks like a map of Martinez and possible trajectories of the bullet. Are there 3 bullets or 3 possible trajectories? Let's find out. What position are they in?
Like the witness said, the man is kneeling, the woman is on her back, It's the night of March 4th and a shot has just been fired.
So just one shot, potentially 3 angles. I am a real detective.
The man looks directly at the woman. The shot's possible directions converge.
Yes, just as I suspected.
Ray from somewhere outside, entering his brain. Ending him.
Thank you, Endurance. Thank you for that astute commentary. Where does it come from?
From the roof outside, location A prime. The glass fractures around the bullet hole. Shards face inwards like a corona behind the woman's back.
Inspect the ghostly figures.
The man does not know the bullet has entered his brain. He never will. Death comes faster than the realization.
Have a look at point A.
The ray cast from the man's mouth unravels into a fan of possible directions, all on the roof at first. The shot could have come from any of them. This is composite location A prime, most likely of the origin points.
This would have gone so differently if I were doing this kind of shit from the start. I'm starting to see where a lot of people's early frustration with my playthrough came from, because like I think, I don't know, maybe the game like kind of encourages you to be more of the more of the detective in the detective game and like experience it this way. I don't know. I've had fun bumbling through like a lot of these encounters having no fucking clue like how to do real detective work. But I feel like now especially it's important, because we don't have Kim here, who's who's the real detective between us, that we'd be able to do this. Okay, shouldn't there be gun residue? Yeah, that's a good point, Harry. It's good detective work.
There could have been. Then the rain and slush and wind washed it away.
Ah.
This was more than a week ago.
So I'm what, 80% sure the roof is where the shot was made from?
72%. With a weapon
72.
that's good for medium range, like a rifle or sports pistol.
Ah,
This is
sports
a good
pistol.
short distance, but not too short. The perpetrator aimed with their back against the railing, or possibly kneeling for precision. This would explain why it only took them one shot.
Oh, so these are potential long-range shots, but there's actually, yeah, potentially someone was just standing right here. If we go by what Clausia said, it could have been Ruby herself, who then escaped down the pinball alley.
The lights were on in here. Outside it was dark. It was like shooting fish in an aquarium, a well-lit aquarium. The victim opened his mouth to let the bullet in. Neither of them would have seen anything outside in the darkness, too busy with their own bodies.
Could the shot have come from inside the room?
Point X would contradict the woman's testimony, rendering the entire proposition void. These figures would be wiped out, detective.
I like how it's talking to me. It's not my thoughts interpreting the scene. It's like it's this disembodied. It's the part of me that's a detective that I'm not. Are there any arguments against A prime, the roof?
None that you've found thus far. But that doesn't mean there aren't any.
There been any more?
That's a 28%, yes.
28%er.
In this model, the shot could have come from a greater distance. Nothing excludes the possibility. Should we extrapolate to include every possible point of origin in Martinez?
I love how I could just say no. No, I think it's option A. Let's extrapolate.
According to your map of the district, this shot could have come from a wide angle of locations, starting with the northern edge of the abandoned boardwalk, ending with an islet in the bay. Let's call them B prime.
Okay, more precisely?
B prime for boardwalk, B double prime for Land's End, and B triple prime for the islet, detective. There may be smaller points in between, but those are too fine to zoom in on.
Let's have a look at point B prime, the boardwalk.
700 meters away. The likeliest of these B positions, 20% chance. A skilled sniper could have made the shot, provided he had a safe sniper's nest. Even with the light on inside, we're talking military training. At that distance, the perpetrator would have had to take wind direction into account.
Okay, let's look at Land's End.
1.2 kilometers away, the least likely of these positions. Let's say 3%.
3%er.
A skilled sniper could have done it, possibly from a tent. No, too far-fetched.
Okay, B triple prime.
1 kilometer away, a point beyond the docks, on an islet in the bay. The fort is ruined, but the perpetrator may have found a stable spot on the beaches surrounding it, where the concrete crumbles into the sea, as you saw in the coin-operated viewer.
On the beaches, you say? Maybe it was the cryptozoologists.
The shot would
No, don't.
5% likelihood.
Don't go there,
is
Brady.
An extremely narrow field of view from the bay to the window, between Rue de Saint-Ghislain 10 and 33A. The angle would have been extreme, and access to the islets is questionable.
Let's not wildly speculate on improper suspects. Like maybe it was Tommy. Maybe Tommy is the bigger guy setting it all up. I know there was a couple episodes ago where I was like, "Oh, why haven't we arrested anyone? We know who did it." And I'm sure you all had a good laugh as you're like, "Yeah, you don't know shit." Now I'm back to square one. I don't know who did it. I don't know anything. Okay, it could have come from somewhere further.
It is possible that it came from B prime, the
boardwalk.
B double prime, Land's End, or B triple prime, the islet.
Could be the 5%er.
You can't know for sure until you investigate those locations.
Guess that's what we'll have to do.
The lieutenant would probably agree that, in this situation, it's best to be thorough.
Well, as I realize now, we don't even need Kim because we have his soul in our brain. And we know what he thinks. I love that. As like a game mechanic and a story beat that I can imagine in the game design thinking like, okay, there's going to be narrative moments where Kim is not with us. But in the absence of our companion, we may miss certain interpretations. This is a fantastic way to like still have Kim involved in the like meta narrative of our thoughts without him having to actually be there in the literal narrative. It's fucking brilliant. Everything about this game is brilliant. Okay, let's investigate. I guess we should... Is there anything we can investigate right here for A prime? Or maybe in the hidden alleyway, maybe we can take another look? Is there any more visual calculus we can do?
So this is where they brought 40 pinball machines to fix them up, a long time ago. Everything is covered with dust now.
Looks like they gave up.
Yes, pinball hasn't enjoyed a heyday for 15 or 20 years.
Used to be a pinball
Yes, Martinez North 22 used to be a pinball arcade. And it has been forgotten. Now there is only one working machine in the main hall. The rest is lost to dust.
Okay.
You clearly see footprints in the downy carpet of dust covering the workshop floor.
Let me just run through this a little bit here.
The dust has not set large prints, most likely made by boots. The size is hard to determine, so the footprints do not speak. They simply exist here, a product of the dust, just as the footprints are still there. Neither the footprints nor the dust speak their secrets.
Okay, so because we looked at that earlier. And I was just curious if there was anything revealing that, with new context, made more sense. But I guess not. Okay. I guess there is nothing back there for this investigation. would have been so much better, like, to have gone back there now for the first time, but not in our storyline. In our storyline, I kicked the door down with 8% chance to do so super early. And I shot the guy down with like a fucking 10%. I skipped forward so much with my bullshit checks. It's great. Okay, so what do we want to do without old Hobbs? I guess I'm just gonna like follow up on some side quests. I'll tell you who I want to talk to. I want to talk to Lena. In my haste to be a good detective, I completely forgot that we found your husband.
Oh, hello, dear. There you are again.
I found your husband.
Goodness, how is he?
He's not well.
He hasn't returned yet?
He's fine, ma'am, as I suspected. He couldn't get back earlier because the water lock on the canal was broken. Now he's just finishing up some work.
Oh, yes. That's my Morel. He's bound to catch a cold staying out there for so long. But I am so relieved to hear that he's okay. Thank you for putting an old woman's heart at ease, if even a little.
You haven't, however. There are dangers out there. Our aging body's foul. Her heart won't rest until Morel is safely back with her.
It's okay. He's out there with Gary. Gary's got his back. You told me you never told me you've seen the Phasmid. Now, see, now I can engage in this dialogue without Kim criticizing me for engaging in a little bit of a fantasy.
Oh, you don't want to hear about some old woman's ramblings.
No, I really want to know.
Well, it was summer. I was building a racing track out of sand on the beach near a tall stand of reeds. Quite a tall one. Many times my height, I remember. When, all of a sudden...
Where was this and how old were you?
I'm getting ahead of myself. I was 5.5 in Betancourt in the suburbs. My grandmother had a summer home there.
She'd just started forming memories. Real memories. Not the billowy haze of infanthood.
The strangest moment of my life. I looked up and one of the reeds moved. Not like a plant, but like a living thing. It stood up and looked at me. Its body unfolded like some antique toy. I've never seen anything like it.
She had no fear, just surprise.
Interesting.
I didn't know this can happen, so I reached my arm and touched the thing. It felt just like a stalk of reed, but it moved, swaying, towering above me. After a while, 20 seconds, a minute maybe, it left, went into the reeds.
Did you follow it?
I tried, but I was only a child. There was mud and high water. I couldn't see it anymore. I was just standing there knee-deep in mud, looking around me.
Where did you go? Don't go.
I love it. Inland Empire's getting invested. Then what?
I ran back home to my grandmother and asked her if reeds could walk, and told her they were looking at me. Of course, she just laughed at me, but I knew what I'd seen. For years, it was a story I told at parties when I wanted to impress boys. That sort of thing.
That's how she caught Morel.
Most people just took it as a strange, amusing anecdote. So did I, honestly. But then I met Morel.
This is actually really interesting.
We were on our first date when I told him my story. You should have seen his face. He said my descriptions matched the Phasmid down to a T. Its white marble limbs, the way it moved.
I'm going to talk about memory in a second and how fascinating this is for, like, personality shaping.
So that's how they met. This is beyond significant for them.
Yeah, what I want to say is, like, there's different kinds of memory. Like, okay, I wanted to quickly look this up. Because, yeah, there's all kinds of different types of memory, which are really interesting for, like, personality shaping. And so, for example, we have, like, semantic memory, which is your recall of, like, your vocabulary and basic facts about the world and, like, stuff that you just don't really have to think about a lot.
because it's just kind of common knowledge. Um, and they're not specific to your personal experiences. They're just things you know. You have episodic memory, which is like your personal experiences, like actual events that you've experienced. And in that, we have this like autobiographical memory. So the stuff that you, in your mind, think about as like the narrative of your life, right? And narrative psychology is something that I have practiced a lot. And it kind of takes stuff like this into account, especially because our memories are not always accurate. It's more about like understanding how the narrative we tell shapes our belief system and predicts our behavior based on that belief system. And here's the thing I wanted to bring up. So, in autobiographical memory, we have originating events, which are events that mark the beginning of a path towards long-term goals. Turning points, events that redirect plans from original goals. Anchoring events, which affirm an individual's beliefs and goals. And analogous events, which are past events that direct behavior in the present. So when I think about someone like Lena and Morel and lots of the characters, but especially them, in terms of like this happened when she was 5 years old, right? This is like an originating event for her that defined a long-term goal. And then she has this turning point where she meets Morel, which like redefines that goal and potentially puts it on a new path, which is like making this her career, not just like something she's interested in, but a lifelong passion, right? And like it said, the anchoring events, these things that affirm an individual's beliefs and goals. Like, I think it's very easy, and I'm a victim of this too, as I was in one of the previous episodes, of just looking at the situation intellectually and being like, you think that these like animals are real? That's fucking goofy, you know? But from a psychological perspective, like it makes a lot more sense. This is not a rational subject to them. It's an emotional subject. It's the recalling of these anchoring events and these turning points where their belief system was shaped by an event that may not have completely sound rationality, but in the internal rationality of emotion, it makes total sense, right? Like, for example, Harry and lots of people, right, rationally, if we were purely rational, we could say, oh, well, the woman who destroyed his heart, you know, whatever happened, rationally, not every woman is going to be that same way, right? There were circumstances that made that specific to her. But as an anchoring point, when he thinks about like his heart being destroyed, it tells us that this is like a universal flaw in people, right? It's not rational. It's an emotional subject, even though we apply that emotional rationale to the more like semantic memory of just like factual things. So it's very easy to like criticize and be like, oh, you're delusional. This is goofy. But when I think about it from this perspective and how formative this was to her beliefs, and that there is a there's a security in, I discovered this amazing thing and no one took it seriously, but it was this initial event, like when my memory started to come online, that I was excited about things, and it was my curiosity and this idea that I could have seen something that, you know, I may never see again, or was so rare. Like, what a wonderful experience as a child. Like, so many children's books like Alice in Wonderland are, you know, parallels to this, like just the infinite curiosity that we have. Or when Dorothy returns from Oz and no one believes her, like there's lots of thematic ties to the fantastic imagination of children, which is not always easy to preserve the older we get. But finding someone who she was able to connect with like that, and they were both able to preserve it together. Like, it's so foundational to their connection to each other that if they were to suddenly be like, yeah, phasmids are not real, or neither is Bigfoot, does the romantic connection they founded based on those beliefs survive? Right? It's an interesting question. And when I think about it like that, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter if what they believe is true. Like, it's led to very true emotions. They're not harming anyone. At least it doesn't seem that way. Gary might be. I don't know. He might be harming someone. But as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason to dispel this perspective for Lena. So I'm not gonna like tell her she imagined it. But it's very curious how our memory can sort of blunt us from the truth, but it leads to very personal truths regardless.
Our first. Yes.
Yeah, there's so much passion. There's so much emotion there. Its limbs are white.
Not all of them, as far as I remember. Some of them on the inside like stalks of marble, if that makes sense.
But that's why I'm like, yeah, if Kim was here, he'd be saying, you're wasting your time. Like, this isn't a part of the case. But I'm curious what turning points and anchoring events have led Kim to be the way he is as well. Maybe we'll get to have that conversation with him the more we get to have these heart-to-hearts. How big was it?
It's hard to say how big things are when you're quite small yourself. To me, it seemed to be taller than I was then, but that's probably not the case.
Damn, that'd be huge. Yeah, just to demonstrate how formative and fixed this memory is, like, me coming in and being like, that's not rational, Lena, is not relevant at all to what is an anchoring event in her life, like something that has affirmed her initial goals as a child. So let's just see what she says, even though I wouldn't say this to her. Maybe you imagined it.
Of course. I've thought about it. But Morel says my report matches with the others. And I'm sure I hadn't heard of the phasmid as a child. Nor had my mother or my grandmother. So how did I know what to imagine? It was only when I started telling my story as a teenager that boys would tell me, Lena, you trying to tell us you saw the Insulindian phasmid out there in those reeds? Get out of here. They just give me a cider and ruffle my hair and tell me to stop dreaming. But I saw it.
Thank you for sharing this with me.
You're welcome, sweetie. I do appreciate the chance to relive it whenever I get one. It was just such an impossibly sunshiny day. So warm.
Oh, and it's probably nice to just have someone indulge her memory like this. I think, yeah, the older we get, the more we sort of need to revisit some of that stuff, because otherwise we will experience a kind of memory decay. Where this episodic memory becomes less and less specific, and we just have the emotional attachments that linger.
And she could get up and walk right into the reeds on her own, into the mud, anywhere.
I'd like to hear about more cryptids, please.
Of course, dear. Is there a particular cryptid that
What's
you're
the most
interested in learning about?
dangerous
The
cryptid?
gnome of Jeroma.
The gnome of Jeroma. That sounds terrifying.
Oh, yes. None of its victims survived. Grieving relatives never even found their bodies because the gnome's venom dissolved organic tissue.
What did it look like?
It was reportedly a small creature with webbed fingers and a protruding forehead and a gangly little thing. Quite scary to look at. A couple of campers found it when it was already dying. They heard an odd wailing in the woods and followed the sound. They were scared and wrapped it in tarpaulin to suffocate it. It still took the gnome of Jeroma an entire day to die.
Any photos of this gnome?
Alas, no.
Ah.
And the first scientist who got his hands on the creature's corpse put it in a jar of formaldehyde, thinking that would detoxify the gnome's venom. Instead, all the venom leaked out of the creature's teeth and into the surrounding liquid, dissolving the creature itself. A poetic end, perhaps, but a real loss for science.
Are there any invisible cryptids? She's going to say most of them are.
What an interesting question. And the answer is yes, there are.
What's
The
that?
call de mama d'aqua, or thin whisper of sound. And that's precisely what it seems to be. Self-replicating sound waves, invisible and intangible. It's very afraid of us, which makes it incredibly difficult to track.
What does it sound like?
Like nothing, it's such a high-pitched sound that us humans can't hear it, nor can other animals. It could be ringing right outside your window and you wouldn't even know it. Could be anywhere. Everywhere, even.
How can an animal be a sound?
Many scientists have asked the same question. Some have claimed that it isn't itself a sound, but a tiny corpuscle that emits sound waves. But there's no evidence to support this theory.
What evidence is there of this animal being a sound at all?
Plenty. It's the evidence that led to its discovery. In the 20s, a group of Areopagi ornithologists, that is, scientists who study birds, were trying out a new recording technology for capturing sounds outside the range of human hearing. When playing back recordings they had made in the foothills of the Ea mountain range, they noticed certain anomalies, patterns that seemed random at first, but on closer examination were consistent with the waveforms of songbirds.
I like this nodding eagerly.
The scientists soon discovered they could track and even predict what appeared to be feeding, mating, and migration patterns based on sound waves in a strictly delimited range of ultrasonic frequencies, even higher than those of the highest pitched bat calls.
This is actually way above my scientific acumen.
She transforms, when speaking about these strange animals, into a confident woman.
That's what I love about this whole subject. Like, there is such a tangible link between her personality and her mental state and her behavior and these beliefs. Whether they are, like, scientifically grounded or not, we have no idea, but this is the phenomenological perspective that, like, you experience real emotions based on your own thoughts and your own perspective and the lens you see the world in. Which is also a perspective that helps us understand, like, Harry's narrative of the world when he sees the hanged man or has a dream sequence or these things. Like, are they real? Does it matter? He's seeing them. He's experiencing them. He's having real biochemical reactions. He's, like, almost throwing up. He's scared. Like, those are real, tangible impacts on his nervous system, regardless of whether anyone else sees these things. Which is just fascinating. Like, look how much it is transforming Lena to talk about this stuff.
They realized that they had discovered a new species and called it the Col de Mama d'Aqua, after the Paracanassian name for the voice of God, which is said to be very silent.
Wow.
They grew quite obsessed with these little birds. Even though they couldn't see them, they could distinguish among individual birds and even began to name some of them.
Name them?
Sequester, Time, Joscan. Those are but some of the Mama d'Aqua they followed individually.
I guess where it gets dubious is like talking about, like, politics or even human psychology to some degree. There is a limit to the objectivity you can discuss in those subjects, and philosophy as well, right? Like, because a lot of it is perspective based, it's subjective. Like, do I personally think this therapy style is effective? Someone else may disagree. the research may also indicate that it can be, but also only on a limited population. And like, there's a limit to the objectivity. And so you kind of suspend your disbelief when you're talking about it a little bit to be like, okay, like this is as much as we can possibly know. But there's a lot of evidence that indicates it is effective, right? There's a ton of evidence that indicates cognitive behavioral therapy is effective for, certain interventions in mental health. But there's also lots of anecdotal evidence that it's not effective in like certain cases, or maybe in certain cultures, or maybe there just hasn't been research in it. So there's like debate about it, right? And same with political ideologies. Like there's no objectivity from what I can tell of like what's a good political system, because like it's just more complicated than that from my understanding. What gets dubious is there are lots of hard facts that these cryptozoologists sort of put out about like this is what the science says, here's the evidence, here's what's real. And it's kind of like, well, when you're talking about does something exist or not, we're less in that suspension of subjective belief and more like, okay, you're making a claim, a grounded claim about something with no evidence. Whereas like the evidence of, is this political system viable, is like quite complicated. You can look at it in a certain culture and see that it is, but then like extrapolate that to a different one and see that it's not. Like the evidence may contradict. So it's just interesting. That I guess that's where some of the internal resistance to be like, okay, am I just placating someone for, indulging in these like ideas? It's not like we're having a subjective discussion about, are these interesting? Because yes, they are interesting, but are they real? It's like, yeah, it's kind of dubious. Anyways, could it be here right now?
Could be. As I said, it could be everywhere. And we wouldn't know any better. It could be ringing all the days of our lives and nights.
Maybe it's predatory.
What if it's predatory?
It's not. Don't worry. If it were predatory, we would have found it by the damage it inflicts.
Damage.
I wouldn't be so sure. What if the damage is also invisible?
That's a good point. Why is it afraid of
That
us?
is a sad story. A group of university students assisting with the field work in their enthusiasm for the project, and no doubt because they were preoccupied with impressing their professors, nearly drove it to extinction.
I'm gonna look real fucking stupid when in the narrative's fiction these things are real and we discover some fucking creature. Because I'm drawing a parallel between Lena and Morel to real life people who get involved in, conspiracies and whatever else. But in the fiction of Disco Elysium, there's weirder shit than a phasmid. There's like an existential vortex where memories and personalities go to die called the Pale. Like there's all kinds of weird shit going on. Who knows if there's not walking stick bugs or living sound waves.
They tried to communicate with it and had no other means but sound. So they started sending out sound waves at frequencies they thought might match the Mama Dakwas. And what happens when a sound wave meets another sound wave of the same frequency, dear?
They cancel each other out.
This lady really should be a teacher. She's really good at the explaining things thing.
They cancel each other out.
Exactly. And these tests were performed so recklessly that when they happened upon the right frequency, well, they wiped out most of the population.
God, it's just like, at every turn, at every opportunity to prove something, there is some tragedy, like, that makes it impossible to detect.
Great regret washes over her. A wending cloth.
I just find this so interesting, like, her role in this world. You have all these people who are delusional about all kinds of stuff, like their own lives, what's really causing their problems. And then you have someone like quite innocent, like Lena and Morel, who they're not looking at like their problems and coming up with these fantastic, unrealistic things about why why their lives are misfortunate. They have this like, the imaginary things in their lives are what make them feel fortunate, or what give them purpose, or what give them identity and uniqueness, and have like forged a romance out of. Like, it's amazing. And are they like stupider or worse off because they believe in something that may not exist, even if it makes them happy? Or are the people who live in reality, who are fucking miserable in it, somehow like of a higher order of intelligence and living grounded? Maybe I would prefer to be like Lena at this point.
After that, the corpuscle appears to have migrated elsewhere. There have been recordings of anomalies similar to those spotted in AI, but they've been few and far between. It's impossible to confirm the presence of any stable Koltamama population anywhere.
Like, it tells us a lot about her belief system, that when she thinks about the problem of the cryptids and why they are not more universally known or whatever else, like, listen to her story. The way she views the world is that like people are inherently collaborative and in pursuit of this truth about something, and they're interested, and there's science and investment in this, and it's such a tragedy that mistakes are performed in the experimentation and in the discovery of these things, and that explains why things are wrong. I see her worldview as being looking at the world in through a more pro-social lens, versus one that sees like the obscuring of reality and the distortion of what's true as being intentional human things. I don't know. I just find her fascinating in this world. She's a very different character than we see normally.
What about what?
This has been educational. Sadly, we need to discuss something else.
Of course, dear.
That's all for now. I love Lena. I love talking to Lena. I love being around Lena. I'm practically a shrink minus the diploma. I guess let's see. We got to talk to this guy. Okay. Yeah. Next episode, we're gonna talk to our. He's not the Sunday friend. I forget his name. The smoker on the balcony. That's what it is. And and now is the opportune moment in the privacy, without the judgmental eyes of Kim and his snickering disapproval of our interest in him. And look at this, we're so anxious. We're so nervous to talk to him that we're literally pacing around. Okay. Next episode, we'll talk to the smoker on the balcony and see if we can't explore some of our own untapped romance.